Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to day one, part two, day one, part two of Freedom Thinking, the Ocean of Freedom. 3-day online via donation retreat. Thank you to everybody who's donated so far. It's so appreciated. Dan, we've signed it. It's yours, mate. I'll post it off to you. Yeah, I can't believe a second one of these have actually sold. How good's that? I never knew I'd potential as being an artist and selling art. But thanks, Dan. Really appreciate that, mate. Yeah, anybody who wishes to make a donation, please. It's PayPal. Do it via PayPal. info@freedomthinking.co.uk. That's the same as our email address. And if you want our bank details, just get in touch. info@freedomthinking.co.uk. You can email us via that, or if you know us on Telegram or WhatsApp, just drop us a message like Chris did. Thanks, Chris. And thank you everybody else who's donated. It's so appreciated. Thank you. All right. Jenny is currently putting Lucia to sleep. I keep saying putting her to sleep. It doesn't sound very good, does it? Putting her to bed. She's putting her to bed. So Jen will be back down. Could be 10 minutes. Could be 45 minutes. Could be an hour and a half. But I'm guessing somewhere around the 10-15 minute mark. She'll be back down. 20 minutes probably max. So with that in mind, this next chapter, this next part, we just wanted to go to questions, reflections, or observations from the participants who are here. If you've got any questions and you don't particularly want to ask it out loud, there is a chat function. Click on the chat, open it up, we will read it. Anybody who's got anything they wish to share, please do so. If there is nothing that comes up, we will just continue. We will continue with, we will continue with the talk. Ali.
Hello.
Hello.
Um, Kind of a little bit like what Colin said. He said that he heard something different with the first diagram, and he really kind of got it differently. But a little bit different in that there were 2 or 3 things that you said at different points, and I don't know what they were. And it was like there was just a glimmer of something different. And I couldn't kind of like hang on to it. And I don't know what it was, and that's fine. But I thought it was interesting that you can hear this stuff a lot of times and still hear something different, even if you don't know exactly what it is. It was a bit like what Jenny was saying about there's no end to what you can hear and what you can hear differently. There's always deeper to go. And I can't articulate where I went, and it was very fleeting. But I think of the same ilk as Colin in that he heard it differently. And yeah, so it's a bit inarticulate, but
That was nice. And I really appreciate you bringing that point up. You know, when we get a glimpse, I don't know about anybody else. I've only had a glimpse of the ocean. You know, I don't live in the experience of being that ocean as a human being, as this day-to-day momentary experience of Dave's life, I don't live like that. I live waving. And when we die, when we die and we leave our bodies, the ocean becomes so incredibly obvious. And the reason that is because when we're in human form, we are supposed to be having a human experience. That is why we're here. We're having a human experience. And in this human experience, the way human experience is born is it's created from thought, consciousness, mind. It's created from it. This is why this conversation is so immensely wonderful, because finally, at last, we have an explanation, an understanding, a scientific paradigm of how our experience of life is born, without exceptions. How could anybody have an experience outside of the consciousness that they are? Why is it everybody has a different experience? We could all go to watch the same film at the cinema and we could all have a different experience of it. Yeah, best film ever. It was all right. Bit overacting, I thought. I quite like the acting. Why is it we all see these different realities? There must be something that we can observe and study in that point. And then when you boil it down again, you realize, oh, it's simply created from what we create via thought. Thoughts like plasticine. You can create anything the hell you want out of plasticine or clay. You can create anything out of clay. You can create that. You can create the Liverpool mug. That's Wendy's mug. She left it here. I'm drinking out of it. Well done, Jen. That was good going. You can create anything out of clay. You can create an image of flowers. You can create a model of flowers. You can create egg cups. Jen's dad does he does pottery, doesn't he? He's making egg cups. What else has he made? He made these, like different sizes, but the different glazes. It's very good. These are really nice. But it's all made out of clay. And when you realize it's like the water, all the waves are just made out. Each wave is like a different trinket out of clay. It's another way you could see the waves. It's just a different trinket. That's a mug, that's a coaster, plate, whatever, vase. But when you realize you're molding your reality, it's like, and you realize that this infinite thing is we have a new experience. So a new wave is born into our experience. And it's a new wave. It's a wave we've never thought before. And it creates the experience of, wow, there's something else. I've never seen that. And it can be quite easy for us to kind of get a little bit carried away and think, oh, that wave's fixed. Until we have another wave about the same subject. Oh, I see. I can see anything deeper. I can see anything deeper. And that's what happens. And before you know it, you start to understand what who was it, Socrates or whoever it was, said, I know I am wise, for I know nothing. Because you realize you can always see something differently. Therefore, do you ever actually truly know anything? Truly, do we ever actually truly know anything? And if you look at that again, you realize it's not what it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you think you know that gets you into trouble. I know that what happened when I was 10 has fucked me up for life. It's that knowing that gets us into trouble. It's that knowing that creates the suffering. What we don't know doesn't create the suffering. When we realize, this is really useful for people who worry about the future. When people realize they don't know what the future actually looks like. I don't know. Does any of us know what tomorrow looks like? I don't know. What's going to happen tomorrow? Might have our plans. We're going to go, might be working, might be coming to this. You might not also. We did some work with a kid who was so stressed out about his GCSEs, wasn't he? This was 2019. And we said to this kid, how do you know you're even going to sit your GCSEs? What do you mean? Of course I'm going to sit my GCSEs. How do you know? You might not. We're like, we're pretty sure you will, but it's not a dead cert that you'll sit your GCSEs. So stressed out, wasn't he? God bless him. Creating these ideas about the future in the now, 2019 then.
He knew how he was going to feel when he walked into the exam room.
Knew everything about it.
Yeah.
Next thing, oh, we're not doing GCSEs this year. Lockdown. He didn't sit his GCSEs. Not at that point. And we had this wonderful conversation of I told you so.
You love those.
Hey,
You love
I
those.
love them. No, it was just nice just to be able to point it out to him. Do you remember all that stressing that you did because you knew you were going to sit your GCSEs and all of a sudden something's happened and you're not sitting your GCSEs, but you were so sure you knew what was going to happen. I don't know. I don't know is one of the most powerful places we can find ourselves. I don't know is where we truly meet people. If I meet people with my prejudices and my prejudgments, I meet my prejudices and prejudgments. When you are in I don't know, it allows the magic of that connection to come through. This is especially useful in families. Families are the people we think we know the most. Our partners, our wives, our husbands, our kids, mums, dads, grandparents, aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters. They're the people we think we know the most. They're the people, ultimately, we have the most ego around. There's something really wonderful when, I remember when you just met your sister and I don't know. And you said, it was the first, you both looked at each other and said, it's so nice to meet you. How old are you?
24, 25. It was on a three principles workshop. And yeah, we had to pair together because we didn't get other pairs in time. So we're like, go with you. And the task was to sit together and take it in turns to speak about something that you enjoyed or were excited about, but not interact. The other person just had to listen. So it was a little bit set up because you wouldn't normally get that unless one person doesn't say anything. But the nice thing is because you were given the permission just to sit there and listen, you weren't trying to think of cool things to say or answers or having an opinion, just listened. And I don't know, I listened to her in a way I'd never listened to her before. And she did the same for me. We were quite tearful afterwards because we both had quite strong opinions about who each other were. And yeah, I just got to meet a different person. Like her character changed for me in that moment, and my character changed for her, and nothing had changed. But mind. It's interesting when you hear people describe you, and you're like, I wouldn't describe myself like that. Really, that's how you see me, and it's quite an interesting, humbling thing.
So yeah, there's no depth, there's no limit to the depth which we can realize anything, even like our families, ourselves. And that's why we said right at the beginning, just listen. If you come with a question, prejudice, really, it's a kind of, if that's the right word, a judgment, a judgment that I've judged something is wrong in my life or anything like that, or these people are wrong, or I need to fix this, I need to fix that. You're not listening. You're listening through the lens of I want to hear this. And the moment we do that, we're not listening. We're not listening to the point. There's a saying that truth will set you free. It's so true. When an individual realizes the truth of who they are, it sets them free. Suddenly you have the ocean, who they are, you find the freedom that exists within it, and you realize you are that freedom. Everybody's free. I remember working in prison and this lad arguing with me. I've said this many times, but this lad arguing with me. And next week I went in, I thought it was a terrible group, because this lad just kept on interrupting. I didn't think anybody got anything from it. Went in the next week, and this lad was he was on his tiptoes and he was bouncing. And it's going to mute you, Myra. Hey, love. And next thing he saw him, and he ran over to me. He was like, Dave, I was like, you're all right, mate. He was, yeah. He said, what you said last week is true. I said, yeah, I know. He went, no, he said, it's true, isn't it? I said, yeah, it's true. He went, I went back to my cell after you spoke last week, he said, and he said, I lay down on my bed and I realized what you're saying was true. He said, Dave, I'm free. He said, can you believe I'm telling you I've never been more free in my life, and I'm in prison? He said, those walls and those fences were not my prison. He said, my prison was my mind. He realized he had imprisoned himself with his own thoughts. He'd imprisoned himself with beliefs. He was creating his suffering by believing everything he thought. And in that moment of realization that his reality was born of thought, it, like smoke, just evaporates. And suddenly you're in this new space. You don't vanish. When the ego disintegrates, you don't vanish. There is still the eternal presence of life there, but it's minus the story. So yeah, there is no end to seeing anything. And it's our knowing that is our arrogance, and it's our knowing that is our ignorance, really. Anything we think we know, you could really class it as ignorance, because really we don't know anything. It's all made up. There is only one thing taking place eternally, and it's creating an illusion of life. Anything we think we know is in the realm of intellect. And the intellect is a consequence of the spirit, of the soul. It's after the fact, it's too late. That's why the intellect can never find the ocean. The wave can never find the ocean. You can't think yourself to ocean. It's in a moment of quiet, when the waves calm down, in that moment of stillness within the mind. Even if it's just a fleeting glimpse, it doesn't matter. It's not based in time. It'll just show itself in a moment. This stillness will be revealed. What is stillness? It's life before judgment, before measurement. This stillness is revealed, and there's a recognition of something whole and magnificent and pure love, pure loving presence. And the only thing that covers it up is the waves, our thoughts. That's it. So in actual fact, it doesn't matter either way. You cannot escape the fact that everybody already is this. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't realize it, it doesn't matter. You are it. You can't be anything but it. To realize it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the livingness of life, but it will change an individual's experience. because the individual become aware of itself. It will become aware of something more magnificent than what it could possibly create with its thoughts. Ali was just saying that, like Cole, she heard something a bit deeper. She'd heard stuff before, but she'd heard it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it's not in the words, it's where you are when you're listening. And one of the things occurred to me when you were speaking about not targeting something, and it reminded me, we had a girl come and work with us who was in her mid-20s, and then she made her mum come along just for support. So mum didn't know anything about it, but she just came along to support her. And over the 4 days, like the mum just giggled a lot, and just like all this stuff was falling off her, and she was having insight after insight, and the daughter was getting a bit annoyed because she felt like she wasn't hearing as much, but she had something she wanted to target, something really she was really struggling with this particular thing. And it's been so cool because we've got to stay in contact with them since, and we went to the daughter's wedding recently, and we've got to kind of keep checking in and seeing what's happened, and like the mum's like uncovering is continue the things that she's seen, the things she's managed to do. And she didn't have anything really targeted in her life. She wasn't going because she thought she had a problem, but actually all this limiting belief that she didn't even know she had has fallen away, and she's living this completely different life. And then her daughter said, well, I'm a slow learner, it's taken me a bit longer, but she has shifted and changed loads. And two of the things that she said stood out to her that she hadn't had targeted were she was terrified of chickens, and that she had found, her and her mum had wandered off on a walk and found themselves surrounded by chickens, and normally she'd totally freak out after an experience she'd had as a child where she had food and then all these chickens just like went on, and she then created this idea she was scared of chickens, and she was in her mid-20s and still you could think of chickens and she'd be terrified, and she's like, oh, I'm not scared of the chickens anymore. And then the other one, she drove to see us, and she said normally she'd stay within quite a small mileage of where she lived, but she drove all the way on her own to see us. And that was a huge thing for her. She's like, wow, I didn't see it as a problem before, but wow, that's opened doors now that I could actually travel and drive myself around. And then she said it was when this big problem, this thing, fell off her mind that she started having insight. But I loved how her mum was not there for any reason. She was just there as a support. And what happened in front of our eyes was just incredible, wasn't it? And it's been lovely to see. And a bit like Ali was saying, there's certain things that she saw back in, it was just when I was pregnant with Lucia. Oh, just, yeah, 2021, the July of 2021. So there's things that she saw, and then she's seeing them like again, but like at a deeper level. And then like the penny keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. So it is lovely when you get to stay in contact with people, because you see like a little seed gets planted, and then it can just grow and grow and grow into all kinds of incredible insight. And did it been open up for questions and things?
Yeah, that was just Ali's comment.
Cool,
so
thank you.
Thanks, Ali, love. Does anybody else want to say anything?
Can I just say one other thing?
Yes, love.
When you were doing the waves and you kept doing this, and you talked about, oh, here's the pizza thought, and here's the coffee thought, and here's the suicide thought, and you kept doing that movement with your hands and saying the different thoughts, there was just something about that made a difference to me in how it came across. I'd seen the wave thing before, and I hadn't seen you do this and talk about all the different thoughts, and you kept doing it. And there was just, I know it's just a different way of presenting it, but there was something about it that I found really helpful.
Good. Good. There was something that just came to me just then. It was fleeting, it's bloody gone now. Or something I was going to say about it. Oh, do you want to say anything?
Not about that, no.
No, okay. This entire conversation can be summed up in one word. Notice. This is all this is. This whole conversation is just a noticing. That's all this is. This isn't a doing. There is nothing to do. People ask us, they go, oh, what do the principles say about this? What do the principles say about that? Nothing. The principles don't have an opinion. They're principles. The opinion is born of the principles. The principles are just pre-existing fact, the fundamental fact, but so the principles don't carry any opinion. So people kind of look at the principles as a way to kind of fix themselves, or they see it as a psychology or a therapeutic technique. It's not a therapeutic technique.
It's a true psychology, isn't it?
You could call it a true psychology, yeah, the true nature of mind, the true nature of psyche. So I'm getting to the point, but it's nothing that we kind of, it can't kind of, it's not in the same realm as NLP, CBT, hypnosis, regressive therapy, tapping, anything like that. It's not the same thing. All those things are ideas born of the principles. The principles pre-exist everything. They pre-exist every single experience we'll ever encounter, even a great idea on how to help heal people. It's only because of the principles that those ideas can even be born in the first place. The principles are fundamental, ground zero, essence. It just so happens at some point in our life we have noticed each aspect of it, but we haven't realized the magnitude of what we've actually noticed. So everybody knows they're alive, everybody knows they're aware, everybody knows they think, everybody has mind. They know that. We've noticed that. But what we haven't noticed is the full magnitude, the absolute magnitude of the point of what it actually is and how it operates, and it's the ramifications of that. The ramifications of starting to gain insight into the nature of reality itself. Reality is an experience. You take an experience away from reality, what have you got left? Even according to quantum physics, it takes consciousness to collapse the physical world into physical manifestation. We dream it into existence. And consciousness is not separate from matter. Every single atom, every single particle is actually aware it's being observed. It's being dreamt into taking form. Otherwise, it becomes wave, according to quantum physics. So this conversation is purely a noticing of what's true and real. Well, that's all it is. It's nothing to do. There's nothing to do with this.
Like you said earlier, people can make noticing a doing. I must notice, I must notice. Yeah. But it feels like it's a byproduct of understanding that you start to notice.
That's right.
And I think it's like anything, as you start to see the truth of this, you become aware, you notice, but you can't manufacture that. Otherwise it does become, right, I need to notice when I'm like this, or I need to notice the waves, or I need to, as soon as we start thinking there's something we need to do, even noticing, it can become a thing. And that's why I've got, like with language, we notice it often with each other. Like if I'm speaking, Dave will notice, actually, that could be really misinterpreted, because you pulled me up on it earlier. I was like, that's a good point. We can, as human beings, we seem to be able to make anything a thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
And the idea that there isn't anything to do is almost troubling to us, because we sort of think, well, there must be something to do because there's something I need to get, or to be, or to get rid of. Or so I think the idea that we're already perfect, we're already whole, that our misguided belief and our misunderstanding can create the impression that we're not. So as misunderstanding gets cleared up, we fall back into what we are. Like there's something pre-existing that creates. There's something living us, and it always has. We don't learn the principles and suddenly they become true. We learn the principles and we start to notice more. Wow, this is true. Wow, this is true. And I think working out with Godel and the people that he housed in his sort of safe, well, as safe as he could make it for refugees, we saw the truth of just how incredible we are as beings, what we can live through and still find joy and laughter and love. Because we were treated with such love and compassion and respect, and they shared their food with us, they shared everything with us, and they hardly had anything. And we were talking to them at that time, we were talking quite a lot about resilience. That was something that was, I guess it was a bit of a buzzword, and
it got people's attention. It was just like, it was a good way to enter conversation, wasn't it? Because resilience was a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah, it was kind of in the news a lot. And but you were kind of sat and you were hearing stories of people who just, it blew our mind, some of the stories. It was so far removed from the realities that we've both experienced. But the respect that they had for our suffering, even though our suffering, like both of our sufferings, really, you know, we had wonderful families, we've been very privileged in so many ways, but our suffering,
or had families murdered and raped, had we?
In front of us, yes. So I kind of felt like, wow, I don't really want to have to talk about the fact that my struggle was with eating disorders, and when I've sitting with people that have actually experienced not having enough money to buy food and would have done anything for a meal. But as I explained because I didn't know the term eating disorder, so I had to explain that and talk to them, and they were just so understanding, and they weren't judgmental, like, are you kidding me, you white privileged?
No, they were saying
there's none of that.
Sounds horrible and stuff like that, weren't they?
Yeah. And what Sid pointed to became so obvious, the unbreakable nature of spirit. And I think that's why I felt in our life together and my life before you, to travel the world and see people from all walks of life who've been through all different kinds of experiences, seeing that they were whole, that they'd felt broken but they never were. And like, what a gift in life to see people wake up to that. People's faces change. They look younger. And like, you got to speak to somebody the other day and you said she looked younger by the end. I think you spoke for a good hour or two. And you said she just looked younger afterwards. Like, the weight of thought on us, when our mind clears, it's visible. And I think sometimes speaking about this stuff can sound so far out there or so kind of expansive, that the practical implications in our lives we would have all experienced. Like Emma being able to suddenly drive further away from her house and feel comfortable, like her not being terrified of chickens. But the cool thing she said is, even if I'd spent my life being terrified of chickens, that wouldn't have been the end of the world. She just saw that what we make up and get so worried about is a dream. I'd love to hear from other people if they've got questions or observations or...
I'm just thinking about what kind of frame I'm going to put that in.
Gold one.
Yeah. No, I'm joking. No. I've just been sat thinking about the last few weeks of up and downness, should we say, or ego, if you will. But I think I'm just gonna add to what Ali and Colin said, really, because even though that when we had the community group on Monday, there was a lot of things that we spoke about that really sort of made me realize that I'd never lost that how do I describe it? Never lost that like awakening as such. Like I've always been there. It's just that I was blindsided by what I actually wanted, but it was there regardless. And I was just it was a really strange experience, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And then today, especially with the ocean and the waves as well, it's kind of brought it back to me to think, yeah, do you know what? Like even though that you've had 3 weeks of crap, like the rest of the year since has been absolutely fine, and I've done a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have before. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still not like there's still bits that I need to work on, but I think it's quite interesting to hear all of the things that I can relate to again, but it seems a bit different. Yeah, that's kind of it from my end, really.
Cheers, Dan.
I was just going to ask you, like you just said there's still bits you need to work on. I'll just be interested to know what you think those bits are.
Yeah, I would as well.
So I don't know if you can remember, but I've always, every now and again I've always asked about impatience because I'm such an impatient person, and like I just I think to me that's my one thing that I just, even though I can't seem to like drop it. I just because I don't like being impatient because I feel like I'd be kinder to myself if I was just patient with everything, and I didn't want like I think the reason why that I've been chasing like another awakening is because I'm impatient for this wave to end, kind of thing.
You're impatient to lose your impatience.
Yes, and I'm anxious about having anxiety.
Yeah.
Like it's all the same thing. And like don't get me wrong, like I feel a lot better than what I have done. But yeah, it's just getting forward, going pushing, like not pushing forward, but just again, I need to remember to be kind to myself because I think that's you can't. I don't feel like that I can be kind to myself and be patient. Like it's either one or the other, and I think trying to sort of get a medium ground with that would be
You feel impatient now? Are you being impatient right now?
yes.
What have you been impatient with?
I just want to feel like I'm back to my normal self.
So throughout, since we've seen you today, has that impatience disappeared?
Yes.
Right. Where did it go?
Back into the ocean.
Yeah. Effectively, yeah.
Mm.
It goes back to where it came from, which was nowhere. And it's really, really interesting because we can look at these things like impatience in your example or anxiety in your example as though they are, these are aspects of me. On one hand, yes. Yeah. Because every experience is an aspect of the ocean. It's what creates the character. But on the other hand, it's none of you. It's not you. And it's really easy for us to not appreciate the fact that everything is created in the moment. When does the ocean exist? exists now. The ocean only exists now. Doesn't exist yesterday. Doesn't exist tomorrow. It exists now. Everything that we are creating is created in the now. So therefore, people would say, I've had depression for 2 years. No, you've had depression in the now. And it is only created in the now. So if I'm experiencing it now, I'm creating it afresh now. The wave that existed yesterday does not exist today. It's a different wave. If you can say, yesterday I felt impatient, but today I felt, well, my impatience disappeared. So my wave obviously went down. At some point it's disappeared again. And now I feel impatient again. It's a creation in the now. We'll just keep recreating the same old thing. It's not something that is who and what we are. It's something we create that then creates the impression of that's who we are, because the ocean mistakes itself for its waves. Josephine. And this is really important to understand. You know, when we give, I remember a man coming to our house and he was doing an intensive with us, and he was saying how he'd had this same experience for X amount of years. And where we live in the Lake District, we're looking out the sitting room windows and it looks over a woodland. And I said to this man, I said, look at that big oak tree there. Can you see it? He's like, yeah. I said, can you see that little sycamore sapling growing up through the hazel there? He said, yeah. I said, which one's been around longer? And he said, the oak tree. I said, yeah. And then I said to him, but which one's more real? Is the oak tree more real than the sapling because it's been around longer? Or are they both as real as each other? Just because something's been around and in our experience more often doesn't make it more true and more real. I don't know. I say this time and time again. I found a freedom in my life that I know lies within everyone. It blew my life apart. That died. A version of me died. He left. And in stood his place, stood an empty man full of love. It's the only way I could really describe it. As opposed to a full man, empty of love. It's the only way I could really describe it. Full of ideas, full of thoughts, full of judgments. Full of judgment about myself more than anybody else. And I judged a lot of people. But the thoughts still occur. And my experiences, my feelings still come and go. I can still have violent thought. The thing that I have carried with me since that moment of realization is the awareness of this and the awareness of the illusory nature of this. I don't need to fix it. It's a thought. It's a feeling. It's a feeling ever hurt me? Actually ever hurt me? Has it ever damaged me? No. I sit here now at the leading edge of my life. I'm at peace. I've been through many different experiences. I've seen so many different circumstances. I know people who've had far more difficult life experiences than myself. Somebody very, very close to Jenny and I has had some of the most amazing psychosis I've could comprehend. And I was speaking with them yesterday and I was saying, isn't it interesting? You sit here now, in the now, at the absolute pinnacle of your life, and you're fine. You're whole. That person was lucky, I believe, that they had people around them that understood life to whatever degree. And they had total faith that the ocean wins, for want of a better word. Truth will out. Give it time, the waves will disperse, the stillness, sanity will return, common sense will return, and it has. And we've seen this with this line of work many times with many people. What the mainstream system seems to do is take an issue and amplify it. How do you amplify something? You focus attention upon it. Give you a label. Go and learn about your label. This is you now. You're this label. Saw a magazine dedicated to ADHD today.
You didn't have any judgment about that at all.
I had
You were just
no
an
judgment.
empty man full of love.
I was in empty mind, stood in the middle of Waitrose, nearly spitting. I'm like, great. They brought out an ADHD magazine. Interesting. I remember speaking to a psychiatrist once. I spoke to a man in mind once. I started with him. And I went in and said, how do you come up with the labels? He said, Dave, he said, right, if I'm honest, if you were parked outside here on this double yellow line and you got a parking ticket and you came in here and you were pissed off, he said, we have to find you a label. I said, what? He said, yeah, we will find you a label. He said, but you're perfectly justified to feel pissed off at the fact you've got to pay a parking ticket.
It's not even justified. It's like, it's up to you, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. But there's no wrong in
No.
feeling pissed off that you've got a parking ticket and you have to pay a fine. He said, but we will find you a label. Great. And I remember speaking to a psychiatrist when I started this community group. Not this community group, no, this is a retreat. Started mine and Jen's community group in 2014, I think it was. And my first session, people were coming, I've got bipolar, I've got OCD, I've got this, I've got that. And I didn't know anything about labels. I just had an experience and realized I was whole. I knew everybody else was whole, but I didn't know anything about labels. So I had to go and learn about it and see what the hell they're talking about. So I rung up a psychiatrist and I said to this man, he was very kind. I got him out of the yellow pages, if anybody remembers that thing. And he was a fellow. I just picked him. I spoke to two. I can't remember the other conversation, but I remember this conversation. And I asked this man, I said, look, I told him a name. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've discovered something about life and I'm trying to help people. I said, now I'd love it if you could help me answer a few questions about labels. And he said, yeah, go for it. I'll do my best, Dave. It was lovely. It was a wonderful, beautiful man. He was totally in the correct profession. He was just one of the most accommodating human beings I've ever met. And I said, look, when I was at college, we used to do an experiment. We always had a control next to the experiment. I said, I'd like to know what was the control that you used in order to do the experiment before you came up with the conclusion of whichever label. He said, sorry, Dave, I don't understand. I was like, fair enough. I said, did you kind of look at somebody and go, well, they've got the life together, you know, they're functioning well, they've got a good income, they've got a steady like family life, everything's comfortable for them, they're buoyant. Did you like look at them and use them as a datum and then compare other people to them? He said, sorry, Dave, I don't really understand what you mean. I was like, right. And I understood the questions were crap. I hadn't really prepared myself.
You didn't think he was going to answer, did you?
No, I didn't. And the next question that I asked him was, you obviously have a line for mental illness. I said, where's your line for mental health? Silence. Just silence down the phone. And then his retort was exactly these words. I'll never forget it. Dave, it seems to me like my industry owes everybody a massive apology. We never work with mental health. We only ever work with mental illness. I said, okay. I said, if that's true, I said, at what point would you ever diagnose somebody as being mentally healthy? And he just straight away said, we wouldn't. We wouldn't diagnose people as being mentally healthy. We've got a problem. We've got a problem in the mainstream system that's trying to help people. The system would not diagnose you as being, it doesn't recognize mental health effectively. Everything is a disorder. Oh, ADHD isn't a disorder. It's not a disorder, Dave. It's not. A amount of people who've said this. No, Dave, you misunderstand. ADHD isn't a disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so many of these people I look at, they're perfectly capable of holding attention on things that they're remotely interested in. I look at the kids in school and they're getting diagnosed left one after another with ADHD. Are you interested in the boring shit you're being taught? Is this stuff you're learning what your soul came into this planet full of enthusiasm about? Because I guarantee you take those kids and you point them in the direction of what fulfills their heart, their ADHD will disappear in a moment. They will have absolute attention, cohesion. It's not the people that needs the label, it's the system. And the system is pointing people to ego. It's not an enemy, it's a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding about who and what we truly are. It creates a victimhood of what happened to you is the reason why you feel like you feel. That's impossible. It doesn't exist anymore. We have to think it to feel it. It's not the way it works. Full stop. And it's not my argument. It's just simply, in order for us to experience it, we have to be creating it in the now. Therefore, what happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, actually doesn't have any power whatsoever. The only thing that has power is consciousness.
It's interesting, all these labels is we are all different. And I think we've somehow got a sense of what's normal and what's right and acceptable and what isn't. And we've only listened to one, but we're listening to something called the telepathy tapes. We've only listened to one podcast.
Oh yeah, that's good, that.
And I actually fell asleep before the end.
Kids with autism.
But it was saying some of the gifts that they're starting to notice and starting to document and research with some of these children that have these heavy labels.
It was autism, wasn't it? Autistic kids.
Well, yeah, children who are non-verbal.
Yeah. That's right.
And they thought that there was sort of nothing going on really, but suddenly these children were finding ways to communicate, and the parents are going, they're reading my mind, like that we're being able to communicate. And I think if
that was and that point you said that they were literally reading, these autistic mute kids are literally reading their parents' minds.
We've only listened to a little bit, but this woman's starting to research and document and study.
Some with 95% accuracy and some with 100% accuracy. Like,
but it's this idea that we've kind of created a stigma or that somehow that they're not normal, so they need a label. But you always say, like, it's the education system that needs a label, not the kid. Like, we need to find new ways of working with people who have these incredible minds that work differently to these kind of people and those kind of people. And actually all of our minds are different. And I think if we can start, there's so many gifts within people that have been given labels. When you get chatting to them, when you start getting interested in them, you realize you've just got incredible gifts and it comes out in this way. But actually when you channel it, it's amazing. And like when my mum works in schools, often the kids that have been classed as the naughty kid, who are like close to being excluded, when she goes in and does art projects and gives them jobs and gets them with like paint and glue, and they absolutely thrive. They love it. They get so excited by it. And she said that's why she loves her job, because she used to be a teacher and she got so disheartened because you're trying to channel human beings who are all different through the same system, and some fit in that system and some don't. And I think that's why we've then had to create all these labels. And then but now we're kind of in this catch-22 that you need to have the label to get the funding, to get the extra help. But then so many people then identify and hold on to that label and feel limited by it. But then we've spoken to other people that said for them, they thought that label described them, made them feel understood, and they found it helpful. So this is our personal opinion about labels. But if you go back to the truth of it, we're all this ocean with the ability to create a reality, and we're all different.
That's right.
We're all different. We all show up different. We all think differently. There are no two people on earth that think exactly the same. There is no one else. And I think that's been the greatest gift in parenting. I read one book and the whole book really was pointing to just look within yourself, because there's only one you and there's only one of your daughter. So there isn't a book written about you. So listen to yourself, listen to your daughter, read yourself, read your daughter. And it's been so incredible because I don't know, I feel it's the greatest gift. I haven't got caught up in trying to be a certain type of parent or any of those things. I've been like, right, we are the only versions of us here. Like, no one else knows better. So it doesn't mean I'm not open if people suggest things, but I get really quiet and make sure, like, does this sit right with me or not? And I think that's the beauty when you start to see it. We've got this ocean of freedom and it's creating, and it shows up different, and every expression is of that ocean. And I think it is hard in the world that we live in. I find it hard sometimes because there seems to be so much chaos and so much going on that, you know, in my perfect world wouldn't be going on. But I know that that comes from lostness, and that through sharing this message being shared with me, I woke up to some of my lostness and I became kinder and more compassionate and more loving. So actually, if I want to see the world and what's happening in it start to change, I feel like sharing this is what I'd like to do for the rest of my life, because it's
until you don't,
but in some form. And maybe there'll be a time when you don't even need to talk about it because it's just realized. But I don't know, I've been around this in May it'll be 20 years since I came across principles, and I still get lost. But there's been an upward trajectory towards more love, more compassion, more presence, and way more grace in the not seeing. More patience, actually, Dan. Like, I definitely feel that's something that comes when you just see it just is what it is. It is what it is. And I think one of Sid's tapes speaks about seeing life as it is in the moment, without the judgment of thinking it should be different. And we start to find a lot of peace there, because you're aligning with what is reality, what is true, one true reality. Some people call it God. Sid spoke about mind, consciousness, source, true self, the now. There's so much richness and simplicity, and all the things we're looking for exists in the moment. There is nothing outside of this. And I feel like I'm very grateful, because I don't feel like there's anyone on earth that I couldn't speak to about this conversation. It applies. It doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter where you grew up, colour of your skin, your religion, because we're all allowed to be different. We're all allowed to have opinions. And that's what I love about the big conference. You've got every single religion, you've got non-religious, people from all walks of life, rich, poor. Like, one of the videos that Dr. Roger Mills showed was when they had a health realisation video. So it was an applications video, and it was showing this work in a homeless shelter. And I remember just sitting there thinking, in my mind at 23, you couldn't be happy in a homeless shelter. You couldn't find peace of mind if you were homeless and you had nothing, and you're turning up at this shelter to try and get a shower and like a hot dinner. And then you were just watching people on this tape having insight and waking up. And there was one particular guy who they then got to follow, and then he started being one of the workers in the homeless shelter, because his shift and his wake up was so big.
Like a mentor.
Yeah. And then he had an apartment, and I think he lived for 2 or 3 years after his sort of big shift. But I think his previous 20 years lifestyle kind of caught up with him. But he got to have, it was 2 or 3 clean years and sharing and helping other people. And I think there's so much work that's gone on with the principles that's not really known about. Like, you often say Linda Ramus is an unsung hero. Like, I don't think Roger Mills gets as much recognition. Like, he was doing work in communities and housing projects, and he was just incredible. Like, he blew my mind, and he is the inspiration for me of why I still do things via donation, even at times people have told you should never do things via donation, you devalue this work. But I know that one of the big projects he did, he went in on half pay, but he didn't care that he hadn't got enough funding. He wanted to do the project, so he went in and he did it, because he knew that every single person that changed would then ripple out. And he had a lot of support. There were some incredible people. There's a guy called Lloyd and someone called Cynthia. I think Cynthia passed away last year. But they helped him kind of get respect in these projects. And he just said, my message is simple. Like, just because I'm a white guy, a psychologist, doesn't make me different from you guys. And he was talking to underprivileged, undereducated. And I think there's something in this conversation that just goes beyond anything we think we are or we know, and something resonates with us. And there's a recognition that we are the same. We've all got our different versions and our different characters and our little egos, but you start to see, in the same way the ocean is constantly changing, so are we. Even this idea of an ego suggests something fixed. It's not fixed. We're always in movement, in change, because the idea of an ego is based in time. It's based in a collection of thoughts, but it's like that moment to moment, what's existing right in this moment is all that exists. And we often say that's why we've given this example many times on community group, but we were in at my mum and dad's, and there was this massive storm. It was such a windy, horrible day. And we had little Rust was here, and we were like, we're going to have to get him out at some point. And we kind of waited and waited. And then suddenly around like 4, 5 o'clock, it just completely cleared up. It passed, and it was like blue sky, sunshine, everything was glistening. And
They're literally,
there was not a cloud.
literally, we're in Essex, so you can see 180 degrees all the way around you of sky. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. You couldn't believe the evening.
No. And we were out on this walk, and I just said today, God, you never would have imagined we'd be out walking tonight in this weather. Like, I thought we were going to have to really like put our rain macs on and just get freezing cold and wet, and I'm not a fan of wet, cold weather. And then I was like, God, that's just like our mind, isn't it? Like when we're in the midst of a storm or in such distress, it feels like that's all you've ever known and all you're ever going to know, and that's all that there is. I was like, God, it's so weird. I was like, why is that? And you're like, well, because that is all that exists, because you only have the moment. So when you're in the moment of distress or overwhelm or anxiety or the storm of your mind, because the nature of the principles, that is your reality, that is what exists, that is your isness.
That is your entirety of your reality in that moment.
But in the same way that the weather could just suddenly switch, a change of thought, a change of mind, we're in a whole new world. We're out of the storm. And then there's times where we're within the storm with understanding, and you're kind of observing the storm. But it's the same thing that happens to our mind. But it really did something for me in terms of my levels of compassion and love for other people. Because I think sometimes when you're talking to someone and you're trying to share this, you're like, right, if you could just for a moment put that down and listen. But sometimes people just are so caught in their storm that they can't see past it. But it's nice because you know that it's going to pass. And then that's generally the time for a conversation. Normally within the midst of a storm is just listening, loving, being there.
That what you're talking about there, just that shift, just that change. As somebody I know has been she's been a tricky character, very quick to take things very, very personally and acting in very destructive ways. I was speaking to, I asked somebody how they were doing, and they said, oh, she's realised something. I said, oh, what did she realise? She said, she realised her feelings come and go. And we've not had conversation. This isn't anything to do with principles conversation. As far as I'm aware, it's just something she noticed on her own accord from what I could glean. She noticed that her feelings come and go. And she said, this person who was telling me, she said, when she realised that, she just changed. You know, that whole saying, truth will set you free, that glimmer of truth, your feelings come and go. Something that I can really take for granted. It's really easy for us to take for granted what we've discovered and go in search of something grander. That's just more waves. That's just going, oh, this wave might be true and real. Getting distracted by the details again. But that whole idea that our feelings come and go. It's like there's so much information in that point if we're prepared to have a look at it. What information can we glean from the fact that our feelings come and go? One, it's not permanent, so it cannot be me. It can't be. If it was me, it couldn't possibly come and go. Then I can't be ill because I have these feelings, depression or something. I can't be ill because if I've got an illness, I've got an illness. It was one of our clients who came here once, young girl, she said, well, it's true. She said, because I've been diagnosed with mental illness. She said, but if I can go for a walk and come back and I don't feel that anymore, she said, I can't go for a walk with cancer, come back and not have cancer. She said, then I'm ill. She said, but if I can go and come back and then it's gone, I can't actually be ill, can I? No, you're not ill. You're creating an experience of life that you don't like. That's fine, you know, it's not, but it's not illness. You know, you could take that point and you can start to notice more and more aspects of just that one point. And it's like we had a man as well who'd been 20 years agoraphobic, and he came to a community group. Jenny and I he just turned up and he couldn't believe he'd turned up. Something had made him get out of his chair and drive down and sit down, and he was terrified, wasn't he? He texted me the next day and said, "You'll never guess where I am." This is a man who didn't leave his house unless he was going to the doctors to get a repeat prescription, which is where I saw
Or
him.
occasionally fishing.
Or occasionally fishing where there was nobody else. 20 years. 2 of those years he locked himself in his bedroom, wouldn't even go downstairs. For whatever reason, he came to a community group and he texted me the next day and said, "You'll never guess where I am." So, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm on the other side of town." He said, "I felt different today after going to community group." He said, "So I thought I'd try and take the dog for a walk to the end of the road." He said, "And I realized I got to the end of the road and I was okay. I was fine." He said, "So I carried on walking." He said, "I've been out around town for 5 hours." He said, "And town has totally changed. I don't recognize it." And then he wrote, "I'm free." I spoke to him. Jen and I spoke to him, interviewed him. He's on our website, actually. I said to him, you know, what was it that changed? I mean, that year, that man got himself a job, got himself a promotion, changed jobs. He lost 6 stone in weight, was it?
Something like that, yeah.
He quit drinking alcohol. He came off state benefits. This is that
Over
one?
2 years, I think.
2 years. My apologies. Yeah, I thought there was something inaccurate there. This is over 2 years. Came off state benefits. He allowed his family to have Christmas again. And I asked him, I said, "Was there something you heard that you can remember that shifted for you?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "What was that?" He said, "When you said the past no longer exists. It's a thought now." He realized he'd been living in the past, keeping the past alive, because we all have the gift to do that. We can create any reality. We are not limited. We can keep the past alive. We can live in a future that doesn't exist. We can think it does, though. This is not about changing your thoughts. This is about understanding the nature of thought. This isn't about positive thinking. This isn't about getting rid of the ego. This is about gaining insight into the way life works. There is nothing to do. That's why I stuck with this. I'm lazy. And when Sue said there's nothing to do, I'm like, what? All right, I can do that. And it's true, there is nothing to do. There is nothing to do. There is nobody in the wrong place. There is nobody who needs fixing. Everybody is in the perfect experience for them, and I know that might be a horrible thing to hear, but they're all right. They're experiencing something. They're fine. Like the weather, this too shall pass.
I remember when we were out in South Africa, we did like a mentorship program out there. So we sort of did 3 days at the beginning, then we did calls and webinars, and then 3 days after 6 months. And there was a lady there who did the first 3 days, and we'd had our calls, and like she almost sacked you once and wanted to talk to me.
Who was that?
I can't remember her name now. But one of the things she realised is it was at the time where some people, I think it was in Thailand, they got trapped. They'd been potholing maybe, or
It was football team, was it?
I can't remember the details, but they were trapped underground and like the water was
I think it was
rising,
a football team,
and they only had a certain amount of time, and it's incredible how they actually got people out. But the whole time she was watching the news, listening to this stuff, and she was in tears. She was suffering. She wasn't present for her family. She said she was so engaged with it, about how they must be feeling, and that how could she sort of enjoy herself if they were experiencing that. And she said then suddenly she realized what she was doing to herself, and she's like, well, I'm not helping them by experiencing misery here now. I'm not helping myself by watching and listening everything to do with this.
Not helping my family, not helping my friends, not helping my community, not helping the world.
Yeah, and she said she saw how in her life she's almost overindulged herself in other people's misery and made it all about her. And she said it was so humbling, like, wow, it felt like she was somehow serving other people by her misery and her pain and feeling it with them. And she realized she didn't know what they were experiencing. Who knows what their experience was? And it was such a cool thing to witness someone waking up to all of this stuff and then to share it with the group.
That was similar to a lady who came and worked with us once, whose father had died.
Oh yeah, yeah,
in a quite a tragic way, and she had lived for 30 odd years with the idea of her father suffering his way through death. And then she did some work with us, and we didn't speak about her father's death or anything like that. We didn't share an opinion or anything like that about it, but she realized, I don't know what Dad's experience was when he passed. I made up a story and I thought it was true. I'd had a thought and I assumed that thought was a representation of what had truly happened. She said, but I don't know. She said, he may not even have been suffering. And that freed that lady. Lifted so much of the weight off her shoulders when she realized she didn't know how her dad was. He may not have been suffering, but she saw the story that she had been living out of. Her thought created reality that she was experiencing. You see, don't know about anybody else. I didn't question reality. I didn't question experience. I innocently lived as though it's all real, it's all truth. I'm experiencing it, so it must be true. It was only because Sue and Sid came along and went, look in this direction, have a look at that, listen to this, that I realized it's not as it seems.
It was interesting. There's someone else that we worked with who we'd heard a bit from their. We heard afterwards. So someone came and worked with us who basically said, I've made the decision, I'm going to take my own life. But someone said to me, go up to the Lake District and spend some time with these two and see if it can change your mind.
See if it'll speed it up.
He's like, well, I've got nothing to lose. And we're like, okay, no pressure. So basically, you need to have insight or okay. But we got on really well with this person, and it was a lovely 4 days, even though there was quite a lot of arguing. But it was interesting because what he said is that he'd really suffered and struggled and got into a depression. And then when he made the decision of what he was going to do, he found this place of peace. And he thought the peace existed because he was going to take his own life. But what he started to see over the 4 days is that the reason he'd started to feel peace is because he had dropped everything. Nothing mattered anymore. And like to the point where he had figured out how to get the drug that they use out in Sweden or Switzerland.
He'd ordered it.
He'd ordered it, but the credit card, the bank had stopped the payment because it looked suspicious. But he said it was so interesting because he kind of thought, well, it must be the right thing to do because now I've made the decision to do it, I feel peaceful. And then what he saw over the 4 days was, oh no, it's just because I've got nothing on it anymore. Nothing on it. And it's so cool because again, it's someone we've stayed in touch with. And you've seen that the understanding was like like a glimmer happened for him. And then it's just grown and expanded and like
his arguing stopped in a moment. It was like you saw his eyes kind of like open wide, and it's like he just stopped arguing, didn't it? Then he started to listen.
And like they're off now doing just stuff I never imagined them doing.
Wonderful
in terms of who they thought they were and what's possible for them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because again, like there's been people who would think, oh, if they were suicidal, they must be feeling awful. But actually, he was in the most peaceful place he's experienced in his entire life. And it's just this idea that we think we know what other people are thinking.
And feeling and experiencing. And
so often we join people in their misery and their suffering because we think somehow that shows that we care or that we love them. But I think that realization is that we don't know. And from a place of not knowing, we can show up for people and we don't have to join them in misery to show that we love them or care for them. Like we can actually just show up for them and listen and be there.
I don't know if I'm feeling miserable. The least useful thing to be around is somebody else who's miserable.
Well, we've noticed like if Lucia is in one of it, like generally it's from about 3:30, 4 o'clock. She just goes and she's tired and really she should still have a day nap, but she doesn't. So she just starts like getting this like bolshiness and loudness and pushing the boundaries. And then Dave, you did 2 days tree work and you said it's the biggest tree you'd ever worked on. You're helping a friend.
It was hard work. You
came back not in the best of moods. And you could just almost see that when you have 2 moods like that meet, there's going to be fireworks. And in the end, you're like,
2 storms meeting makes a supercell.
I'm going to go and have a shower. Like, I'm the adult. I should probably be the one that steps away. But
yeah, she won't back down.
But yeah, joining someone generally doesn't help them.
No.
And I think
this is the thing. This is why we say if you're listening for somebody else, stop. Listen for yourself, because when you raise your level of understanding, you raise your frequency of being, you are so much more useful to the world. So much more. It was something that hit me one time when I really struggled with guilt. And my ex-wife was like, I thought I owed it to her to be guilty after what I did. And I remember just going, this was months later, she's like, will you just cheer up? Seriously, you're doing my head in now. I was like, but honestly, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I need you to know I'm sorry. She's like, I know you're sorry. I knew you were sorry months ago. You're doing my head in. Did I take heed? No, I carried on. I made myself suffer because I thought somehow my suffering was beneficial to her and our relationship. It wasn't. It just annoyed her. I had a really crap time of it. And our relationship really suffered as a consequence. You know, we don't owe it to anybody to suffer. We're not actually bringing, especially if we're carrying guilt and stuff like that, what quality does guilt actually bring to any circumstance? You can apologize, we can be sorry, but that guilt and carrying that heaviness and that weight around, and like, it doesn't bring anything of service to the world. It doesn't bring a quality to the world that is valuable. It brings the frequency of mankind down by one more person, and possibly whoever else gets fed up with being around us. You know, we don't owe it to anybody to not be happy. And I say this because I used to look at my life and go, how can I be happy when there's people on this world who are suffering? How can I be happy? Well, I have the opportunity to be happy. Is that not utter waste for me not to take it? What a waste. It's not selfish. It's, if anything, it's kind. If we have the opportunity to be happy and set ourselves free to forgive ourselves. Take it. What you bring to yourself will be magnificent. What you bring to your family will be wonderful. There is no benefit to anybody in holding grudges towards ourselves or others.
I think you see that as it's a fact that no one can step outside of the three principles. No one can step outside of mind, thought, and consciousness. We can't escape it. And I remember hearing Roger Mills called it psychological innocence. And I guess the way that I saw it was in any given moment, we can't do or be anything other than the thinking we have available to us in the moment. And it's interesting because that statement has really annoyed people at times. But I was just thinking of an example, and I won't go into huge detail on it, but in 2018-19, I went to see a therapist who ended up sexually assaulting me. And you called the police in the end. And you also called him and told him not to lie about what had happened. And he ended up going to prison he got a 18-month sentence and did half, or something. 16-month sentence and did half. And it was interesting because I carried at different times throughout it a bit of guilt for a few months of, I knew he was doing the best he could, and he made a mistake, and he was old, and he had family, and so different things. It didn't preoccupy me too much, but it came to mind. And then one of the ladies that came to sort of, I think it's actually called victim support, even though I didn't see myself at that time as a victim. And she said that actually he'd been on a register already for sexual assault of a minor, but they didn't want to put the child through going to court and all of this. And then I sort of suddenly realized, oh, actually I may have prevented this happening to somebody else, and like the guilt fell away, and I saw it quite differently. But I'm so grateful that what came to me was quite a lot of compassion for what had happened, and for myself. Like, it really did rock my world for a couple of weeks. It was really like I was all over the place. But I think it was knowing that people are doing the best they can given how they think in the moment doesn't then mean that there isn't consequences, and that's okay too. And I think that's something that people sometimes struggle with, computing. And I think what I saw through that is actually sometimes it is kinder and safer for somebody to be put in prison. And actually it gave him an opportunity, and we got to ask and check in, and he ended up writing a book, and it gave him an opportunity to think about what he'd done, and there was a consequence. I have no idea how many people he may have affected in his career, because he's coming up 80, I think.
And he's quite clever, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, when I spoke to the police, they were saying, you know, this, I'd never heard the term gaslighting and all this stuff, and it's a very typical. But I was so grateful for this understanding to go through that experience. I was so grateful that it was me that it happened to, and I had a loving, supportive family around me that really were there for me. And I was so grateful for this understanding, because it meant that I didn't have to live with, well, not even, that's not true, because I think people find forgiveness and they've never heard of the three principles, but it's something that came so within the same day. We both laid in bed together cuddling, and we were like, God, I feel so much compassion, and what an idiot, like, he's just really messed up. And I felt so grateful for that. but I can also see that the consequence that happened to him was perfect also.
Yeah.
And it hopefully has prevented anyone further being affected by him. You do know we're going to 9:30.
9 o'clock, isn't it?
9:30. 7:30 till 9:30. I think we put. What
9
did we put
o'clock.
on the flyer?
7 till 9. 7 till 9.
We started at 7:30.
7:30 till 9.
Okay.
Godell finishes at 9.
So we've put 9:30.
3 till 9.
9.
Thanks, Daniel.
You made the flyer, so you should know.
I should.
I think when I put the times up for the breaks and things, I'd put 9:30.
Did you?
I thought 2 hours would be.
Amateur.
Catherine says 9, and she's never wrong.
Well,
That's
we
true.
know that. Thank you, Oracle. No, thank you, everyone. Thank you so, so much to you all for making the effort to be here. We really, really appreciate you all being here and supporting us and just being interested, and your kindness and your donations. Thank you so, so much. You're all wonderful. We're going to start back same time tomorrow. We'll have a couple more diagrams and whatnot to go through.
Oh, good. You're going to auction them off.
Say that again.
You're going to auction the diagram. I know, Dan got lucky there.
No,
I took a screenshot of it.
plagiarism, mate. Plagiarism.
I could print it out. Anyway,
I need to get a
thank you
little
so
paper.
much. Delightful day.
Just one sec, mate. Hey,
Oh, they're copyright. Okay.
copywritten, mate.
No, I was going to say actually today we will screenshot all of them.
Yeah.
Dan gets the original, but I will put them on the WhatsApp group. I'll put the pictures. Are you on the WhatsApp group, Dan?
I don't think so. How do I get the?
If you send me, are you on, you're on WhatsApp. If you send me your number, I can add you to the WhatsApp group. So if you just put
Okay.
it now, I'll grab it.
Okay.
Just type your number into the chat with your country code and whatnot as well. And anybody else who wants to be added to either a WhatsApp or a Telegram group, please do.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, you
All
have
right.
Telegram too. Okay.
We're going to stop recording. See you tomorrow, everyone.
Bye, everyone.